The Answer.
Get the latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. So President Trump and Russian tyrant Vladimir Putin scheduled to meet in Alaska on Friday to talk about peace in Eastern Europe. Gosh, I hope they'll have time to maybe go ziplining at Ketchikan or dog sledding at Sitka. Regardless, the idea is that there is some sort of territorial swapping for a cessation of hostilities, and that's what Trump telegraphed in his remarks about this forthcoming meeting.
President Putin, I believe, wants to see peace, and Zelensky wants to see peace. Now, President Zelensky has to get all of his everything he needs, because he's going to have to get ready to sign something, and I think he is working hard to get that done.
Will Zelensky have to give up territory, Mr. President?
Well, you're looking at territory that's been fought over for 3.5 years with, a lot of Russians have died, a lot of Ukrainians have died. So we're looking at that, but we're actually looking to get some back and some swapping. It's complicated. It's actually nothing easy. It's very complicated, but we're going to get some back. We're going to get some switched. There'll be some swapping of territories to the betterment of both.
For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined for our weekly conversation by Stephen Bucci, who served America for 3 decades as an Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official. Now visiting fellow in the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Stephen, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
It's always my pleasure. Thank you for having me back on the show.
Have you ever ziplined in Ketchikan, by the way?
I've ziplined a lot, but not in Ketchikan, no.
I highly recommend it if you ever get up that way. So the sit-down between Putin and Trump and maybe not Zelensky, a proposal has already been floated, this by Putin, to basically say, you give me the eastern part of Ukraine, which I already control, and I'll agree to a ceasefire. That was rejected by both the EU and Zelensky. So where do you see this going, given that state of affairs, what Trump has said about some land swapping that will likely have to happen?
Well, I'm not optimistic yet on this. I mean, I'm glad they're going to have some talks. That's a step forward, one hopes. But, Putin is just such a poor choice for a negotiating partner. He doesn't have any problem looking you right in the eye and lying. He's clearly got no particular moral restrictions about targeting civilians, like within minutes after he says, okay, I won't shoot anymore, and then he goes and whacks another apartment building. So I hope this is going to go somewhere, and I don't think President Trump is going to get, kind of hoodwinked, but I think he is overly optimistic that this is going to really produce something wonderful at this point. I mean, maybe down the road, but I think Putin is going to have to be made to feel some additional pain before he really sits down to make a deal that would, any of us would recognize as, fitting that name.
And Putin's calculus here, too, trying to crawl into his mind. I mean, he's continuing with the bombings in eastern Ukraine. I think Zaporizhia over the weekend, on the eve of these talks, which is perhaps the poor form. But, I mean, the territorial gains have been painstaking, and it's not like at least it seems to me, you correct me if I'm wrong, that there is a glide path for consolidating control of the entire country. So, I mean, what's really his appetite to try to get more than he already has?
Well, I think it's still high. He wants the whole country, and I think that's pretty obvious to anybody.
But where is he? Where he is? Where? Sorry to interrupt, but where is he in pursuit of that 3.5 years into this?
Nowhere near where he thought he'd be. Clearly, and he is feeling some pain. A lot of it domestic because he's having to force people to go and fight. He's having to go hat in hand to the North Koreans to ask for some additional fighters. He's, been talking to different, terrorist groups who kind of sell themselves as mercenaries. None of those are good looks for the head of a country that wants to style himself as still being a superpower. But he does have the stronger hand here over Ukraine if President Trump wants to push it in that direction. And I just get concerned that President Trump wants a win here so badly that he's going to accept what's a crappy deal that down the road is going to lead, might be a temporary pause, but then down the road you see Putin jumping in again when he gets a breather. I think all that needs to be considered. I like to think President Trump is a really smart guy and sees that as well. I don't think I'm having some sort of Nostradamus moment here on my part. I think it's pretty obvious where Putin would like to go. But, I'll be cautiously optimistic that President Trump can pull something out, but I'm not ready to break out the party balloons.
Doesn't he also have something to remind Putin about, in addition to the ability to impose more sanctions? And that is, hey, we cut this deal with Ukraine. We have this mineral sharing arrangement, so that's important to us. So, we're going to defend that arrangement. You understand this. So whatever your designs are on the whole country, those aren't going to happen because our interests are aligned with Ukraine per this mineral deal that we cut. You understand that. So what do you think you're in line for, given that reality?
I think that is exactly the kind of negotiating stance and methodology that Trump needs to follow. He should lay out all of the factors there for him. He doesn't have to be bombastic. He doesn't have to make a threat per se, but he needs to be bluntly honest with him and not project into Putin some sort of Western mindset of how negotiations normally go. Because Putin doesn't think like a Westerner. He thinks like a KGB agent. And that means you got to be tough and tough again to get the point across. So I think that's probably a good plan that you just outlined. I hope that or something very much like that is what's going to be put on the table by Trump.
He does have a bit of momentum going into this sit down, and that is because Trump brokered this peace agreement between longtime rivals, to be polite about it, Azerbaijan and Armenia. They signed this deal that to boost bilateral economic ties after decades and decades of conflict between the two nations. So that was sort of a pleasant surprise that Trump was able to consummate.
Yeah, that was a kind of a surprise, and Trump kind of is a surprise sort of guy. You never know when he's going to pull one out of the hat, both literally and figuratively. And I think all of us who want to see peace there in Ukraine and give these poor people a break from what was a completely unprovoked attack by Russia 3.5 years ago, we're all hoping that that's where this is going to go and get to some sort of agreement. But I don't think, I think Putin is still negotiating like he's Hamas and just, no, we win because we're still alive, so we're gonna demand everything. Israel has to go and think that's a good negotiating stance. Well, Putin has his version of that. No, I just want everything in Ukraine. And, oh, by the way, no arrangements that would potentially hinder me in the future if I change my mind and decide I want the rest of it.
Another burning oil derrick that Trump has to deal with is Gaza. And some developments there. Trump speaking with Israeli PM Netanyahu yesterday after the Israeli Security Cabinet approved Netanyahu's plan to engage in a full-scale military occupation of Gaza to destroy the remaining Hamas strongholds and attempt to retrieve the remaining hostages. This has been, of course, treated in some quarters as a broken promise. Netanyahu said there would be no military occupation of Gaza, and now there is going to be an attempted military occupation of Gaza. But this is, I mean, that's a little bit, those critics are being a bit disingenuous, are they not? Because this is a temporary military occupation for this specific purpose. And then Netanyahu, as Netanyahu said, there will be no extended military occupation. It will be some sort of a governance there that will not be Israel.
Look, Netanyahu doesn't want to stay in Gaza forever unless all the Gazans leave. I think then he might consider it, but that's not likely to happen. So, but he's been forced by the intransigence of both Hamas and the international community over this to be in a position where Hamas is removed from power 100%, and some other entity comes in to manage it. And thus far, no one has volunteered to come in and do that anywhere in the Muslim world or the international community. So I believe it's twofold. One, Netanyahu understands it's probably the only way he's going to be able to get the remaining hostages and the remains of the hostages that have already been murdered. And it's the only way he's going to root out these last few remnants of Hamas's leadership and fighters, because once somebody else gets in there, that cancer is just going to regrow. I don't care who they are, unless it's somebody like us, and we don't want to do it for sure. But on the other hand, the announcement of it is literally throwing down the gauntlet to the Muslim world. You guys are trying to be helpful. This is where you need to step up and do it. And he's sort of trying to force their hand. Whether that accomplishes what he wants or not, we'll see. But, you get these Looney Tunes like Macron and Stammer and all these guys, and they're picking on Israel as if Israel is the one who started this whole thing, and that somehow Israel doesn't have a right to protect itself. Oh, and on top of that, while you're protecting yourself, you should really be the ones who are feeding all these people who are spitting on you and attacking you and did all these horrific things. So I think this is Netanyahu's attempt to restabilize the world to some sort of realistic picture away from the crazy nonsense that's been going around thus far. But we'll have to see if it works.
Well, the other thing about this too, it just struck me over the weekend, the opposition to Israel coming from a small group of, in MAGA world, a small group of conservatives who otherwise understood back post 9/11 that we were in a civilizational fight with radical Islamist terrorism, whether in the form of Al-Qaeda or ISIS. And fast forward to October 7th, and it's the same fight. It's just Hamas and Hezbollah and other proxies of Iran. And by the way, concurrent to this story out over the weekend, ISIS soldiers behead Christians in Mozambique, burning church and homes, a quote-unquote silent genocide in Mozambique and Congo. So Christians are still being persecuted, or worse. by ISIS, which still has remnants of its former self in operation. And so now do a little bit of juxtaposition here with what's going on in Gaza. These terrorist organizations, they don't get the message. And so do you want these conflicts to persist, the civilizational struggle to persist, or do you want to eliminate the threats to civilization once and for all? It seems to me that needs to be put to some people who think Qatar is an ally of ours and Israel is not.
Yeah, it's this wing has popped up in the Republican Party. It baffles me because it's not seemingly tied to any reality, and I think it's a problem. I think, frankly, some of it, and I know this will get some calls into the station, I'm sure. Some of it is also tied with the Ukraine conflict. You have people that you would have thought would have, been strongly in support of helping Ukraine, not sending troops or anything else, but at least keeping them in the fight. And they're not just tepid about it; they're like violently against it. And there are people that I would normally agree with on a lot of things, but in this area, not so much. So there's been this shift in the conservative movement where this wing has popped up, and frankly, it's not being helpful. And I think President Trump has got to balance that with his inclination to try and do the right thing in both of these situations and helping the aggrieved parties.
One other Trump action I wanted to get your feedback on. He's been a busy guy, as is his wont. He ordered the Pentagon to use armed forces to carry out basically missions against drug cartels in Central America. He signed a directive, the reporting is, to use military force against certain Latin American drug cartels the administration has deemed terrorist organizations. And so now the report is that you have armed services in the planning stages of what they are going to do consistent with that directive from the president. So now you have the prospect of military action on foreign lands in pursuit of drug cartels. What's your view on that?
I think that is probably not that great an idea. I mean, there might be some very specific actions, maybe the head of a drug cartel, you want to go down and render them and bring them back for prosecution here in the United States. That's something the special operations community could do, though also our intelligence community can do that. It's beyond the scope of normal law enforcement, but it's not. It can't be construed as an invasion of another country. I think there are a lot of people that have read the Tom Clancy novels and are thinking we're suddenly going to have, teams of special operations forces all over Latin America assassinating drug cartels and trying to annihilate them. First of all, most of those drug cartels are enormous numbers-wise, and have fighters involved in them that are not Muslim extremists but have the same level of extremist thought process. In other words, they're willing to die for their cause. They're true believers. They see anybody from outside the country as an existential threat and will go down fighting, which is the kind of enemy that you usually need more than a couple of guys to deal with. So I'm hoping that maybe this whole maneuver is actually a very small effort with a lot of publicity tied to it, a lot of good messaging. But anybody who thinks it's a brilliant idea to line up American forces and start thinking that they can run all over Latin America going after bad guys, the Banana Republic response days are long gone and should have been. So I would be very cautious. If President Trump asked me, I'd say, boss, don't overuse these guys or overextend them, because all you're going to do is have a bunch of them coming back in bags. They may kill a whole bunch of bad guys in the process, but I'm not sure that's going to solve the problem.
Stephen Bucci served America for 3 decades as an Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official. Now a visiting fellow in the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Stephen, thank you as always.
It's my pleasure. I look forward to talking to you next time.
Great. And Stephen joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Rashaw talks about building income in retirement.
You know, you can actually structure it in a way that have that $4,000 a month coming in the door every single month. So you don't have to look